Albert and Johnny are going to sing a hard cider song for us now.
At the mill where they made sweet cider, I made sweet love to you. The mill wheel was turning and my...
Hello and welcome to episode 5.4, the October 1st, 2025 Hard Cider edition of Notes from the Aisle Seat, the podcast that covers the arts in northern Chautauqua County, sponsored by the 1891 Fredonia Opera House. My name is Tom Laughlin, and I'm your host as we bring you news and information about arts events at the Opera House and around the region, including interviews with artists and creators across the county. My freshman year in college, I learned about this delicacy called hard apple cider. I was told by those in the know that if you took a fresh gallon of apple cider and left it in a corner of your closet for 4 months, by February it would ferment into an alcoholic drink. Being a Long Island boy and not knowing anything about apples or cider, I thought this was a cool idea. So I stashed a gallon of cider into the corner of my closet and waited. February came and I opened it up. I was lucky it didn't just explode in my face. I actually tasted it, and it was alcohol-y, but pretty sour and vinegar tasting. Dismayed, I flushed the gallon down the toilet, and was lucky I did so before consuming any of the bacteria that was no doubt further down. I've learned better over the years, and today I stick with good fresh local apple cider, which fortunately will be in abundance in the next couple of months, and pairs well with grape or apple pie. Yum. The TwinTiers Theatre Consortium is an organization of regional performance venues that came together almost 13 years ago to offer mutual support and ideas for bettering their operations. The 1891 Fredonia Opera House is a member, and Executive Director Rick Davis rounded a couple of his colleagues together to give us some insights into what this group does for and offers to its members. Well, this is going to be one of the most unusual and interesting interviews I've done in quite some time because although I do concentrate on the northern Chautauqua area and the 1891 Fredonia Opera House, there are many other kinds of venues like the Opera House in the region, and I'm joined by 3 people now who are members of the TwinTiers Theatre Consortium. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves and their particular venue. So everybody's going to know I'm going to have Rick Davis. So Rick, go ahead. You give us a start here.
Hi, Rick Davis. I'm executive of the 1891 Fredonia Opera House Performing Arts Center.
And I have with me Mr. Zak Covington.
Hi, I'm Zachary Covington. I'm the executive director of the Barrow Civic Theater, which is in Franklin, Pennsylvania.
Great. And also I have Michele Conklin.
Hello, Michele Conklin here, and I'm the executive director at the Palmer Opera House here in Cuba, New York.
Okay, 3 executive directors. Oof, I feel overwhelmed. Okay, so Rick, what I'm going to do first is to give you an opportunity to talk about the TwinTiers Theatre Consortium itself, what it is, what it does, what the organization is all about, and why all of you have gotten together to form this consortium.
Sure. So basically, this was the brainchild of the executive director, or the former executive director of the Struthers Library Theater in Warren, Pennsylvania, Marcy O'Brien. And she had this idea to come up with a way for a variety of theaters and performing arts venues to get together on an annual or semi-annual basis and just share information with one another. I think she came up with the idea after having attended a League of Historic Theaters meeting somewhere outside of the state. And as always, when you get together in those types of conferences, with those types of organizations, what you benefit the most from is the interaction with other theaters and other organizations, other members. And so she thought that surely there were enough of us venues within a two-state area that we could get together on a regular basis and help one another and share ideas and what works for us, what doesn't work, challenges we're having. And the key was that we are venues that are not necessarily in each other's service area. So we don't really compete with each other for the same audience. And that means that we're, I think, more open to sharing and being more upfront and honest and candid with one another about things that we're doing and that we're working on, and that we may not necessarily be as candid with those within our service area. We don't want to give away our secrets to the competition, so to speak. We want to benefit from the competition. And so we started this TwinTiers Theatre Consortium, the Twin Tiers kind of being Pennsylvania and New York states, back before COVID. I think 2017 was the first time we got together. And it's grown over the years to a broader geographic range. Each of us has brought in other organizations that we were aware of, that we knew. And we get together at this point twice a year, once in the spring, once in the fall, and for a day, just to share ideas and to talk things over. And I always come away from it with having learned something and with new ideas. And I think one of the interesting things about it too is that we're not all exactly alike one another. Some of the members are community theater organizations. Some are presenting organizations. Some do community theater and present. And so we get a little bit of everything comes up in the conversation whenever we get together.
Yeah, that was one of the things that struck me as I was trying to do a little bit of research, because I looked up all of the venues, both Zak's and Michele's venue, and that's what I kind of want to get to a little bit right now, because the difference in your three venues, the three of you are all sort of rural venues, but you all do three completely different things. So, Michele, why don't you give us a little bit of a start and kind of give us an idea of what you do at the Palmer House and maybe how you see this consortium is benefiting you.
All righty. Well, first off, I feel very, very fortunate to be a part of the consortium. And as you have alluded, we are all very different in many ways, but there's a thread running between all of us that really kind of knits us together nicely. Our sizes are, vastly different, and our offerings are vastly different. But as Rick, I never come away from one of our meetings that I haven't taken, several important things back to us. And maybe I can't do the same types of things because of my size. We are a very small theater, but good ideas, good information, things that we may not be aware of because of our size and our location. But we do a bit. We have like about 4 theater shows every year, plus then we have a children's theater group, and we also have a Christmas show that we produce. We do a team trivia once a month. We do open mic once a month. We do all kinds of concerts and varied, different genres. We have a wonderful summer program of about 10 or 11 concerts that we do out on the lawn of the school. And then the fact that the building, the Palmer Opera House itself on the second level, We never put in permanent seating. So it also allows us to do rentals. We have weddings, we have proms, we have corporate gatherings, we have fundraisers. So we're quite varied, and we try to, take advantage of as much as we can.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a you're very, very connected to the community, the Cuba community in the area.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I often say that I think that I receive more visitors and answer more questions in our Cuba Chamber of Commerce, which is only just across the street from us.
Thank you, Michele. And Zak, now I'm going to turn to you. Talk a little bit about the Barrow Civic Theater. And you know what's this is going to be an observation of mine, but all three of you have the same history. You all took a tattered building; it was all in disrepair. The people in the community got together, they built it all up, and now it's wonderful. And Zak, that's the same story over there, isn't it?
Absolutely. Our theater is from the early 1900s. It burnt. It was rebuilt for the third name for the building. It was the Park, and then the Caton, and then now the Barrow Civic Theater. We probably are a 90% producing theater, so we have just a small house of just under 500 seats. And Franklin Civic Operetta Association is our board of directors. That is our producing theater group, if you will. Strictly community theater, volunteer community theater. And we're producing between our small box space and our main stage and our youth theater programs. We're producing anywhere from 12 to 16 shows a year. So at any given time, we might have 4 shows in rehearsal at once. As far as Franklin and the oil region is considered, we pride ourselves in being very important to the economic development of the area, have a wonderful working relationship and many partnerships with restaurants and businesses in town. Some adjust their hours that they're open based on when we have shows. And of course, restaurants, we like to see those all full on show nights. And I won't speak about the parking in Franklin, but everything else, it's great when our marquee's lit up for a show, and it's just a buzz downtown. So
That's
that's
great.
kind of our model. Yeah, just mostly we produce community theater shows.
So and that's what I mean about the difference of, the looking at the three of you. I mean, I think Zak, you have the largest staff and probably produce the most, and Rick, you sit in the middle, and Michele, you're kind of, the more community-based, smaller regional type of thing. So Rick, I'm going to ask you right now to talk a little bit about perhaps what do you see as the common thread running between among all three of you?
Sure. Well, I think the fact that we're all nonprofit organizations, we're all facing, regardless of that we operate differently and produce or present different types of events, we all face many of the same challenges. And so getting together enables us to talk about those challenges and how we're each addressing them. And I think that we all are in rural communities as well. So what is an audience issue for us might also be an audience issue for the Barrow in Franklin, or for the Academy Theater in Meadville, Pennsylvania. And so just being able to talk and share things that work, things that don't work, ideas we've heard from other places, it is an opportunity for us to solve some of our own problems.
Zak, you want to add to that?
The three of us, of the dozen or so members of the Twin Tiers, we've been in our positions for the duration, really, since of that. But we have seen a lot of new leaders come through some of the venues, and I think another great thing with Twin Tiers, kind of a thread that is that we pride ourselves, I think, in being mentors to new leaders in their positions. And this is a new we'll say situation or concern or something that's come across their desk and they're unsure how to handle it, and they know they can reach out to the Twin Tiers.
Michele, this must be a big benefit to you in the sense that you know, Cuba's a pretty isolated place, let's face it. And to be able to talk to people across the regions and see what their problems probably gives you a sense of feeling less isolated in what you do, at the Palmer, I would imagine.
I agree with that. I think that we have found since belonging that maybe we're not quite as isolated as, that we thought we were, and we sit right on I-86, which is right almost in the middle of everything. But especially these two gentlemen that we are talking with today, they have been most helpful. And anytime that I feel like I'm losing grip or I really need to bounce something off, I have these friends that I can go to. We have a occupancy of 237 here, which is much smaller, but we have some complications because of the different types of services that we provide that maybe Rick and Zak don't have. But we have really found our way, and I was born a self-starter, so I'm never afraid. I'm never afraid to reach out or to discover a new way of doing something. Yeah.
I got probably time for like one more question to talk to the three of you about, and I think it's probably going to be talking about challenges. What's the greatest challenge you think you're facing right now as a performing arts venue where you are? And is the consortium is helping you out with that? You can certainly talk about that. Michele, would you like to kick us off with that?
Sure. I think the biggest challenge that we have faced is since COVID. Before COVID, we would hold a program, we would do a show, and people just came. And because we were, offering all different kinds of genres of music and theater and, art expositions, and you name it, we tried it, and people just came. And since COVID, it's been a little bit more difficult. And so we've had to try um, different techniques to get folks in here. And sometimes it's not necessarily just a program, but something to get them in the house, because sometimes folks, maybe they're a little afraid of the fact that it's called the Opera House, and what it might be held for them. But I think that's been our hardest challenge.
Zak, what about you over there in Franklin?
Yeah, I'm not going to steal Michelle's answer, but I think another layer to that here is we are walking a line right now with we need to make sure we're not becoming too busy for our little community.
Right.
We want to provide as much as we can, but people are being much more selective
Mhm.
these days with how they're spending their money, and dark weekends in our industry is bad, for the bottom line, for the business side. But we find ourselves maybe pulling back the reins a little bit on not offering too many opportunities for people, because then they have to pick and choose. We can't sell out a house, like we used to. People are being much more selective on how they spend their money.
And Rick, you get the last word here.
For us, something specifically that we're always struggling with is how do we reach our audience? Marketing, different marketing ideas. What used to work doesn't necessarily work anymore, or what we're used to doing doesn't reach some of the new audiences we're trying to reach. So we look to other consortium members for different ideas and new ideas and ways to affordably try different marketing techniques. And some we've picked up several things. Actually, this idea of a podcast came not from a consortium meeting itself, but from a conversation driving home after a consortium meeting. So,
Yeah, well, and here I am holding a podcast. Well, I want to thank you all for your work. Michele, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Zak, thank you also. Good luck with your rest of your season.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you. And Rick, I'll be seeing you around. So, thank you for taking your day off, actually, to come talk to me.
sure. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a great
Thank
day.
you. Bye-bye.
Okay. On the day this podcast is released, Rick will be meeting with his colleagues for their semi-annual meeting in the fall. I want to take just a moment to offer my support and encouragement to all the member venues and hope that they continue to do the good work of bringing arts and entertainment to Western New York and Pennsylvania. Thanks for all you do.
Salve Regina, Mater misericordiae, vita dulcendo, espes nostra salve.
The Arts in the Afternoon series will be presenting a documentary entitled Jago, Into the White, on October 11th at 1 p.m. Italian sculptor Jacopo Cardillo, known as Jago, has been called the new Michelangelo for his stunning sculptures in white marble. I asked Associate Professor Peter Tucker from the Department of Visual Arts and New Media to help shed some insight on this artistic sensation. Coming to the 1891 Fredonia Opera House is a documentary about one of the most unusual sculptors I have heard about in a long time. I'm pretty sure his name is pronounced Jago, and the documentary is called Jago, Into the White. And with me to discuss it is Associate Professor of Art Peter Tucker. He's a sculptor in his own right, works primarily with wood, but his wood sculptures are really fantastic. And he's been on the podcast before. So, Peter, welcome back.
Thanks, Tom. I am excited to be here with you.
Yeah, great. Great to have you. So I think the first thing I'm going to try to discuss with you about Jago is this. All of his marble sculptures, and he sculpts in marble, so that in and of itself is quite unusual, are white. I mean, they're white. The marble is incredibly white, and I think that's where the documentary gets its title from. When you see these kinds of images that he sculpted, and we'll talk about some of those in a bit. What's your impression immediately about this startling white color that he uses?
Oh, I love it. I think I mean they really are pure. Yeah, I think, and I haven't dug enough to find out where he's getting his marble from, but my guess is he's getting his marble from that kind of white marble, which Michelangelo also used, is from the west coast of Italy, and I suspect he's getting it from the same place. But your question about the white, I think it's startlingly beautiful. It's just personally, I think they're just really, they feel really pure and really lovely. And I think whatever the detail he can get in it is just incredible. You know, the skin, the little tiny folds in Pope Benedict's skin, for example, in one of his pieces, really, really beautiful.
So you already touched on the fact that one of the titles, it's not really a title, but it's a reference to him. He's called the new Michelangelo. And, what do you think just separates them, though, slightly between when you see Michelangelo's work and you see Jago's work? What are the subtle differences between the two?
That's an awesome question. I think I guess I was thinking about this because I think I can certainly see the similarities in that they're both incredible craftsmen, no question. Michelangelo was also, besides being a sculptor, even though that was his favorite form of artistic creation, was also an architect and also a painter. I mean, he was everything, right? I mean, that's where he is the reason that we have that term Renaissance man. He and Da Vinci both. And so once Jago starts doing that, once he becomes an architect and a painter and a sculptor, then I'm happy to talk about comparing him. I think it's a little much to call him a new the new Michelangelo, except when it comes to, I think the sculptural stuff is really spectacular. I mean, as an artist, I'm a little jealous of someone with that much skill, right? No question. And he also I watched some documentaries about him and watched a little bit about him. He also just seems like a really, really lovely individual who's trying to do good things in his community. Like, I think there's a lot about Jago that makes him a really appealing individual, and I look forward to seeing in the documentary.
One of the interesting things, I read an interview with him where he, talks about himself, and a lot of the questions that were asked of him were very standard, but he always seems to take this position of being somebody and nobody at the same time. Like, he doesn't want to call himself an artist. He doesn't even know what art is. He doesn't like to go to exhibitions. He'd rather sit home and have pizza with his friends. There's this way about him which he tries to he doesn't even take the mystery out of his own art. He just doesn't even acknowledge it to a certain extent. You know what I mean? I found that fascinating, that when I look at the starkness of his sculptures, I can see that in his work.
I think I agree. I think he seems like a really fascinating individual. I in a few interviews I saw with him, he used the word courage, which I thought was interesting. One of the things that stuck out with me was he talked about, and this is where I think the Michelangelo stuff comes in, is at some point, I think when he was a young kid, he said, I want to be better than Michelangelo. And so I think that's why we have these discussions at all. But he also just talked about hard work, right?
Yes.
Like, I know I need to work harder than anyone else. It was interesting because we just had a visiting artist at the college, Abe Ferraro, who's an alum of our department, has a show in Buffalo at Niagara University right now till sometime in January. Worth going to visit. But Abe said the same thing. He said, when I was in grad school, I think he said when I was in grad school, I made the choice to work harder than anyone else because I wanted to succeed as an artist. And I think Jago has that same sort of attitude. Like, I'm just gonna work my butt off, and it will pay off. And obviously it does.
Yeah, I read somewhere that he works about 90 to 100 hours a week when he works. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about two particular pieces that he's done, or maybe three. The first one is the Pietà that he created, and he's changed the genders on that. It's a picture of a man holding the apparently a dead body of a female. And how do you respond to? And I think he also did a sort of a David-like sculpture, but again, it's a female body rather than a male body. Do you have any idea why he's chosen to do these gender switches in these particular pieces?
Not in those particular pieces, I don't. But I would assume, like I mentioned earlier, I think he's really taken a contemporary spin on everything he does. And I think it makes a tremendous amount of sense to switch those genders so that here we are talking about it, right? Because I love art that makes me think, right? And whether or not I like it or not, I think is often a different story. But I love it if it sticks with me, right? So, and I think he couldn't recreate Michelangelo's Pietà. No, I don't think anyone could. It is magnificent. If you haven't seen it at the Vatican, it's spectacular. I think he's just trying to get us to think. I really do. And I think he did talk in one of the interviews about another piece of his where he was referencing some of the Renaissance sculptures that depict rape, and the women in those sculptures, he said, didn't seem like they were being tortured, and he wanted to depict the reality of that, which is really hard and painful and difficult. And when you see the one that he did, it's pretty powerful. And so I think he was again, trying to sort of make these more contemporary, and I think also kind of deal with the reality of the human condition in a way that Michelangelo couldn't. An artist of the Renaissance couldn't necessarily do that, because again, you're commissioned by the church, you're commissioned by a Medici. You have some leeway, especially when you become Michelangelo became famous during his lifetime. So he had more leeway than probably anybody else, but he also was forced by the Pope to come to Rome. He didn't have a choice. He was forced to do the Sistine Chapel. That was not a decision Michelangelo got anything to do with. He probably didn't have anything to do with the content of what was up there either, right? I mean, and you're going to do this. So it's really hard. And again, why it's difficult to compare this contemporary sculptor with someone from the Renaissance and the High Renaissance. So
he did one other work I want to talk about, which is to me was kind of fascinating. He did a very sort of I don't know. My reaction to it was kind of very stiff, and it was a Pope Benedict XVI, and he did one that was very formal, but there was no sense of the person, the human figure in the original. And then all of a sudden he did another one in which the Pope appears without any clothes on. And all of a sudden you see this very, very frail old man behind the clothes. And it's really kind of a stunning piece to look at how that actually works and what that says about not only just the human condition, but the way we look at certain kinds of individuals. They're just people underneath the whole thing.
Right. I think, Tom, that's actually the same sculpture. I'm pretty sure he started with that clothes one, and I agree. It looks like a sort of, bust of a very staid and kind of typical formal bust with his cassock. I think that's the proper term, and a big cross. But I'm pretty certain that once Benedict stepped down, he took the clothes off of that same sculpture. And you're right, and then it becomes absolutely fascinating. Right, it's stunning. And that's the one I was thinking about when I was talking about the skin. I think, and they show images of his back. I mean, just the incredible wrinkles, probably a little overdone, I would imagine, but really, really and so much. You're right. I think so much more interesting as a work of art, because that now I just want to look at this thing. And there was something else. He did something with the eyes, and again, I hope we see this in the documentary. I hope we get more information in the movie at the Opera House. But I'm pretty sure that was the same piece, and I agree 100%. I think the first one was formal, a little stiff, but the part two after Benedict stepped down looks really, really amazing and really just absolutely captivating. I'd love to see some of these in person.
So would I. I mean, I looked at that. It was haunting in a way because.
Right.
Benedict XVI. I mean, it's not just that he looks old, and how often do you see a sculpture of an old man in his like late 80s or early 90s completely revealed like that? It almost looks like a living corpse in a way. And like you said, the detail overdone? Peter, I don't know, because I mean
exactly.
I'm not 90 yet. I will be, hopefully, but I'm not 90 yet. And when I look at that, I go, maybe that's not overdone. Maybe that's what a body of an 88, 89, 90-year-old man looks like.
Right.
I found it, and I've never seen a sculptor like that before. I've never seen a sculptor of an old man in that kind of detail. Bones, clavicles sticking out, I was floored, really floored.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And it gets so much more interesting in part two, version two of that piece.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think it is. To me, then it becomes about the man, right? He is no longer Pope. He is a man, and I think that and I think that signifies I don't know if Jago is religious. Michelangelo, by the way, was incredibly devout. But in the Catholic Church, I think you're right. I mean, as Pope, he is seen as the voice of God on earth. And so, but then once Benedict steps down, that becomes a whole different story. So anyway, I don't know, Tom, did you dig in and find that the story with Oprah Winfrey. Did you
No,
hear about
no,
that connection?
no, I
connection
didn't.
with him?
No, I didn't hear about that
Well,
connection.
this was sort of fascinating. If you want me to
yeah,
talk
go
about
ahead.
that a little bit. So it's kind of fascinating. So apparently he had displayed a sculpture of his, which was a fetus, or a newborn baby, I shouldn't say, a newborn baby, which was in marble on the ground, and it was attacked by some teenagers, right? So they kicked it, they threw stuff at it, blah, blah, blah. They tracked down those kids, and then he invited them to his studio, and he taught them how to carve and taught them about, carving stone. And so then, and there was some news stories about that, about the fact that he, instead of wanting these, kids to go to jail, wanted to meet with them and taught them about stone carving. And apparently Oprah saw that, and she is one of the reasons that he then has pretty quickly risen to fame, because she was able to highlight that story. And I think also his brilliant use of social media helped, but she is certainly a part of his rise to fame, because she then brought that baby piece to New York City. So it's kind of fascinating story. So.
Yeah, it is a fascinating story. Well, it says a lot about the man, and I also think that for people who are maybe not so much interested in art, or perhaps they think of art in a very classical sense, that this is a way for them in coming to see this documentary that's going to give them an insight into contemporary art, but through a lens of classical art that they probably are already very familiar with.
Right. I think you're 100% right, which is why I'm excited about it, right? I mean, I think anytime artwork can bring other people to the table, that's doing a great thing.
Peter, thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate your expertise and insights. You're a joy to talk to all the time. And, you're not on this podcast often enough, so we'll have to do something about that.
I appreciate it, Tom. It's really fun. And thanks so much for inviting me.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Peter. Bye-bye.
Bye, Tom.
Jago, Into the White will be screened at the 1891 Opera House on Saturday, October 11th at 1 p.m. Tickets are $15 general admission, $10 for students, and can be purchased from the box office by calling 716-679-1891 or online at www.fredopera.org/tickets. Arts in the Afternoon is generously sponsored by Dr. James and Marcia Merrins. Here is the arts calendar from October 1st through 14th. The cinema series continues with 3 diverse offerings. Presented on Saturday and Tuesday evenings at 7:30, this month's movies are The Roses on October 4th and 7th, Downton Abbey, the grand finale on October 11th and 14th, and Spinal Tap, The End Continues on October 18th and 21st. Here's surprise guest Paul Preston, the movie guy, with a quick preview.
All right, it's time for the 3-minute movie drill. Here we go. Now, full disclosure, I'm a fan of the original film about a very unpleasant divorce, Danny DeVito's War of the Roses from 1989, with Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner. Love that movie. So the idea of another movie based on the Warren Adler novel wasn't too enticing, but the filmmakers do go a different direction, and that pays big dividends. One thing didn't change. The 2 leads are fantastic. This time it's Benedict Cumberbatch and Olivia Colman in The Roses. With those actors, the Roses now start their romance in London, and it begins to deteriorate when they are successful in Mendocino, California. Well, Coleman's character, Ivy, is successful, and even though Cumberbatch's character isn't a failure as much as a victim of horrible luck, it's enough to sink their relationship, often to very funny results. Now, if you love the black as night darkness of 1989's War of the Roses, there's less of that here, but I imagine some people might just enjoy the broad farce aspects of the Roses' collapse more easy to enjoy. But make no mistake, the film still ends with a sucker punch right hook. With Austin Powers and Meet the Parents director Jay Roach at the helm, this version of The Divorce Among the Roses may not launch any grand conversations about society and its marriage norms, but I did, and imagine you will, laugh a lot. These next 2 films, Downton Abbey, the grand finale, and Spinal Tap 2, The End Continues, hilarious title, are more than anything about seeing old friends again. So if you're a fan of both of these franchises, you'll enjoy them. The Downton Abbey family, the Crawleys, return in this film to news that the matriarch of the family, Cora, discovers that much of her family's fortune was lost by her brother in the American Great Depression. How will the family move forward? How will they hand things down to the next generation? I can tell you this, Julian Fellowes, the writer of the entire TV franchise, as well as The Gilded Age and Robert Altman's film Gosford Park, is great at this. This is his thing. These eras, the 20s, 30s, the Victorian era. Whenever there's a period of time where being proper is the most important thing, he nails it. Good casting additions spice up the film like Alessandro Nivola and Simon Russell Beale, no slouch. The second film, Tom, of this franchise, if you haven't seen it, a film wants to shoot at Downton, and the contempt these people have for actors, hilarious. Now, the house is aflutter because Noel Coward is coming to visit. I think Coward himself would be impressed by the characters and writing of Julian Fellowes. As for Spinal Tap 2, I've always thought that the idea of an aging rock star was ripe for mocking. Now, much like the first film, there isn't much by way of a plot to hang your hat on. Band member relationship dynamics come to a head, the band clashes with marketers. The overall plot is that Spinal Tap agrees to reunite after some time apart, but that's all you need. Then make with the bits, and the film does. They don't all hit, but much like The Naked Gun, which I reviewed on these hallowed airwaves, enough do. And you can couple that good feeling with just seeing them again, seeing Nigel, David, Derek, and Marty. There's desperation and absurdity alike in their attempt to reunite, as well as dynamite cameos from Elton John, Paul McCartney, Garth Brooks, Lars Ulrich, Questlove, Chad Smith, and more. And if you didn't know what a holdie is, you will. It's an award you get for making exceptional hold music. This is the kind of nonsense Spinal Tap dwells on, and thank the gods for that. And here's another movie with a real short and limited theatrical run, so if you get to see it in a theater with the rock music cranking, worth it. Go to the movies. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Paul. And a reminder that the Tuesday night screenings of the cinema series are closed captioned for your convenience. Also at the Opera House on Saturday, October 4th, is the National Theatre of London's presentation of Dr. Strangelove, starring Steve Coogan, beginning at 1 p.m. as part of the Arts in the Afternoon series. Tickets are $15 for adults and $10 for students, and you can hear Paul Preston and me talk about the movie version of this play on episode 5.2, the Flannel Season Edition, for September 3rd. At the Fredonia School of Music, the Fredonia Flextet will perform on Tuesday, October 7th at 8 p.m. in Roush Recital Hall. The College Symphony will perform on Saturday, October 11th at 8 p.m. in King Concert Hall. The Fredonia Trombone Choir will perform on Wednesday, October 15th at 8 p.m. in Roush Recital Hall. And as an advance notice, the U.S. Air Force Concert Band with the Singing Sergeants will be performing on Thursday, October 16th at 7 p.m. in King Concert Hall. Admission to all these events is free and open to the public. Also, an advance notice that the Main Street Studios will present the musical The Addams Family beginning Thursday, October 16th. The show runs Thursday through Saturday at 7:30 p.m. with a matinee on Saturday, October 18th at 2 p.m. and also the following weekend, Friday and Saturday, October 24th and 25th at 7:30 p.m. See the show notes below for a link for ticket information. The next Songwriter Circle at the Lakeshore Center for the Arts will be on Thursday, October 16th at 7:30 p.m. and will feature songwriters Ceci Taylor, Doug Wilcox, and Melissa Sowers. Tickets are $10, available online or at the door. See the link in the show notes for ticket information. The Darwin Barker Library will feature a local authors talk on Saturday, October 4th at 12 noon. Local romance author Joan Wall talks about her latest book, Falling for Autumn, the second in her Music City series. Copies of her book will be available for purchase and signing. And remember, if you have an arts event you'd like mentioned on the arts calendar, please contact us at the Opera House at 716-679-1891 or email us at operahouse@fredopera.org. Please give us at least a month's notice in advance of your event to ensure a timely listing. Also, once again, a reminder to consider becoming a member of the 1891 Fredonia Opera House. Without the generous support of our members and donors, we would not be able to present the events and concerts that we do. Your membership is critical to making it possible to bring the arts to the northern Chautauqua region, and we are grateful for every member. Membership has its benefits, so please consider joining today by clicking the link at the bottom of the show notes and choosing your level of membership. Thank you. Here and There, the Chautauqua County Lecture Series, will present its next lecture about 19th century Chautauqua pottery and its history, given by Town of Hanover historian Vince Martonis. Here's Vince to give us an outline of the contents of his presentation. It's a pleasure to welcome to this segment of the podcast the town historian for the town of Hanover, Mr. Vince Martonis. And Vince will be giving a lecture as part of the Here and There Chautauqua County History Travelers and Memories series on 19th century Chautauqua pottery. So Vince, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Tom. It's a pleasure to have such interest in this subject, and I hope people learn from what I'm about to give them, why it might be important for them to listen to the podcast and attend the talk on October 9.
So Vince, give us a little insight about how you got into this particular activity of collecting and researching red clay pottery in the 18th century in Chautauqua County.
I'm going to start out with very briefly with why I started collecting and when I started collecting, because I've been around in Chautauqua County for an awful long time, playing with its history. Started it actually in the 1960s, walking through the woods and finding old bottles, and then I wanted to learn more about them. So it took a little while, but about 5-6 years after that, I joined a club. And I'll say more about that later on with regard to contacts. It was Western New York Bottle Club, and they're still in business today. Why I started collecting was I wanted answers. I was ignorant about a certain bottle, a name on it, a name of a person, a name of the medicine possibly, or the name of a brewery. I wanted more information, so I started searching, and pretty soon I found out that collecting bottles and such was related to all kinds of other collecting sources, and one of those is pottery. I had got an interest right away in pottery of Chautauqua County, so I looked for merchant mark pieces, but I developed a deep interest right away in the redware of Chautauqua County.
So what was it about redware that grabbed your initial interest?
Well, redware and stoneware are both forms of pottery. Why I got into redware is because it has a vast array of decoration and colors in the glazes, and I'll explain this in much more detail in the program. Now, the Chautauqua County redware sites, there are really only 3 that produce pottery, and these are the 3 that I will focus on in the program. Now, there was at least one other pottery in Chautauqua County, and I'll tell people a little bit about it. I'll tell people who the Odell brothers were of Portland, New York, and I'll explain why we don't have any pieces extant known from them at this point, and what I did to try to find the pieces. But let's get into the 3 that I did focus on. Haven and Kenyon is one of the potteries. Now, this was a pottery that no one knew about until I discovered it, and I'll explain the time and how I did that back in the 1980s, and what the difficulty was for me to actually find where the pottery was, even though I knew it was in Sheridan. The second pottery, Caleb Matthews in Gary, there was very sparse information on that pottery, a little bit in some history books, and I'll show where, and give some examples, and a little bit with another collector or two who were looking for Matthews pieces too. And then the third one is the Fentons, and when I say Fentons, there's a father and son involved, and I'll give you information about those, and another man named Whittemore. So the Fentons and Whittemore. And there was some information written about them in a couple of different publications, and a lot of discrepancy in the information written about them. Same thing with the Matthews, the information that was there was some discrepancy, and I'll explain how I was able to clarify that.
You're also going to spend a little time talking about where these potteries were. They're scattered all over Chautauqua County, I gather.
With the Havens and Kenyon pottery, I'll focus on Sheridan quite a bit, but also I have to get into Fredonia a little bit too. and explain why, because we're working with an early date there, 1818, for the Haven and Kenyon pottery. And besides Fredonia, I found a very strong Forestville connection with the Haven and Kenyon pottery, and I'll go into that. And there's some great interest there tied to the War of 1812, which I'll talk about, and land dealings in the town of Hanover and Sheridan. The Haven and Kenyon pottery also had connections back to Madison County, which you got to know about. And I'll go through what Elias Haven was doing there, and along with his partner Joseph Kenyon, and go further back to his roots in New England. And also, there's a little bit of a Canadian connection, which is quite interesting, and that ties into when I go into the War of 1812. I'll explore that a little bit. The Caleb Matthews pottery, as far as location, we're dealing with Gary, of course, on the Gary Ellington Road. There's some Ellington history there that I need to go into, but also I have to take Caleb Matthews back to Albany and New England and explain his connections there. Albany, there's a lot of information there that's very interesting with Caleb Matthews. The third pottery, as far as locations, we have Jamestown as a primary one. And we're talking about an early date here of 1812. That brings in a Mayville connection, which I'll explain. There are a number of contradictions about Mayville in the published information about the Fentons. And I'll explain exactly how I was able to clarify that and pin down Mayville as the starting source for the Fenton pottery. And besides Jamestown and Mayville, I'll go into quite a bit of Fluvanna information, which is where the pottery ended up. And also a little interesting tidbit on Chautauqua Lake itself. And as far as a prehistory with the Fentons, I need to go into a little bit of Burlington, New York information and take it back to New England, because explaining how Fenton was such a big name in New England and how that transferred into Chautauqua County.
Now, when we're talking about 19th century pottery, we're talking about pretty much the early 19th century. Am I right? Like, when did these potteries flourish and come into being, and how long did they last? About when did they all sort of peter out?
This is pretty tough, and there's a lot of discrepancy with respect to dates with these potteries. Not so much with the Haven and Kenyon as far as the starting point, but the ending point of the pottery was difficult to pin down. But I'm going to go into exactly what evidence I use to get a date of 1828 for the Haven and Kenyon pottery. The second one, Caleb Matthews, there's a little bit of discrepancy on the date that it started, and I'll explain how I was able to clarify that. And also an ending date for this pottery and how I arrived at a date very close to 1860 on this. And then the third pottery with the Fentons, and this is a very brand new information. I'm going with the date of 1812 and the Mayville location, and no one's ever done this before. And I'm going to explain exactly how I was able to show that this is the fact, and how I established the date and exactly that Mayville as the initial location.
I also understand when you come for the lecture, you're going to bring a few examples of some of the pottery that originated from these sites, so that people can take a look at them and get a first-hand view and see what they were like. Yes?
There are very few for the Haven and Kenyon pottery, but I will bring to the talk 2, possibly 3 examples of the 4 known pieces of Haven and Kenyon pottery. I'll bring this to the program. And people will see some very rare forms. I'll explain how I found them. There's some fascinating stories connected to these. One that ties to the people who own the property. Another that ties to my meanderings about Western New York, looking for pieces and how I was able to find a certain piece. A third one that ties to people that I knew, and how a piece was dug up out of the ground back in the early 1900s and how it ended up with me. And an interesting tidbit there, I hope to be able to have time to tell the story of how finding that piece that was dug out of the ground is tied to the our 9/11 tragedy. And I'm making no joke here. This is a definite connection, which is a fascinating story. And then the fourth piece will tie to not just Sheridan history with respect to the pottery, but to Sheridan history with respect to a very specific resident, and also to Forestville and to Canada and the War of 1812. It's an amazing piece that I'll have on display at the talk. The second one, Caleb Matthews, there were only 3 known Caleb Matthews pieces in the Fenton History Center when I started looking for redware pieces, and 2 in McClurg. But the problem there is one that they had identified as Matthews is not a Matthews, and I'll explain why later on in the program. And then I'll explain why one other one that they did have, also had, is actually a Caleb Matthews piece. So they had one misidentified and one that they did not know was a Matthews piece. I'll go over both of those and show pictures. And I'll explain how I was able to find a little over 20 pieces myself that I found and identified as Matthews' work. With the Fenton pieces, there are 5 known. 2 of those are in the Fenton History Center, and I'll show pictures of those. 3 of those are pictured in a book written by a local historian.
You seem to have spent a lot of time looking for these pieces, finding them and then identifying them, and then also re-identifying some pieces that apparently were misidentified.
Now, 20 Matthews pieces are in my personal collection that I've been able to identify over the years. Now, how did I find them? Well, that's a long story, and I'm going to get into a lot of different stories when I do the program. The finding Fenton and Whittemore examples, well, there are 5 known, 2 in the Fenton History Center, and I'll talk about those and show pictures, and 3 in a locally published book by a historian, and I'll go over that later on too. How do I find and identify the pieces? One of the biggest things you can do right away is develop contacts, and I'll explain how this is important and the various successes that I had talking to collectors, not just pottery collectors of different materials, items, talking to historians, and talking to the dealers who deal with, and then not just pottery, but other kinds of antiques, and establishing relationships with them. I'll go over the importance of attending shows, garage sales, household sales, estate auctions, and visiting shops and using eBay, and how I was able to get success from those sources. One way to share is with displays, and I'll go over the different kinds of displays that I've used over many years, and I'll also go over show and tell, and how that could be important, and visits to people's houses, see collections, and having them visit my own house. And I'll also go through publishing, and how I was able to find more pieces by sharing with people through newsletter writing, through newspaper writing, through magazine publishing that I did, and also through books. And I'll have examples of my 3 books at the program. A book on each one of the 3 strong redware potteries in Chautauqua County. And that's about the end there.
Okay, well, you've been very thorough with it, and I appreciate the time that you've taken to come on the podcast and give us a bit of an outline of what it is that you're going to present. It all sounds really fascinating, very local, and very much of historical interest to the residents of the county. We should know more about our history here.
Yes, thank you, Tom, and I really look forward to sharing my information with the people. And I hope to send them away with a lot more information about the county they live in, and why it's what its benefits are with respect to local history and the items that are attached to local history.
Great. Thanks, Vince. We'll see you at the lecture.
Very good. Bye-bye.
19th Century Chautauqua Pottery, part of the Here and There Chautauqua County Lecture Series, will be presented on Thursday, October 11th, beginning at 7 p.m. Admission to the lecture is free. Donations are gratefully accepted. And that's it for this hard cider edition of Notes from the Aisle Seat. My thanks to Rick Davis, Michele Conklin, and Zak Covington of the TwinTiers Theatre Consortium, Peter Tucker, and Vince Martonis for being my guests on this episode, with special thanks to the movie guy Paul Preston. Notes from the Aisle Seat is a production of the 1891 Fredonia Opera House in Fredonia, New York. For more information on any of the Opera House's events, call the box office at 716-679-1891. Visit the website at www.fredopera.org or email at operahouse@fredopera.org. Notes from the Aisle Seat is available wherever you get your podcasts and also on the Opera House YouTube channel. If you like this podcast, please consider following us by clicking the follow button on our home website at aisleseat.podbean.com and spreading the word through your social media feeds. If you have an arts event you'd like featured on the podcast, why don't you drop us a line at operahouse@fredopera.org and we'll see about featuring your event. Please try to give us a month's notice in advance if possible to facilitate timely scheduling. If you have any suggestions, comments, or criticisms of the podcast, just drop us a line at operahouse@fredopera.org. We'll be glad to receive your feedback. Our next episode will be available on Wednesday, October 15th, 2025. I'm Tom Laughlin, and until then, be safe out there and be kind to one another.